My name is Sophia, and if you are listening to me today, I want you to hear every word carefully. This is not a fairy tale. This is a story of dreams, love, promises, and the pain that changed everything. I was born in a small village. Our house was tiny. Just 2 rooms with mud walls, a broken roof, and a small courtyard where my mother grew flowers in old metal cans. We had no electricity for half the day, but the nights were beautiful because the sky was full of stars. As a little girl, I used to lie on the ground at night, looking up at the stars, wondering what life was like beyond the hills. I would dream of a place where lights never went out, where life was big and colorful. I grew up with my mother and my younger brother, Rayan. My father died when I was 8. That night changed everything. I remember sitting beside my mother as she cried silently, her body shaking, but her voice never coming out. From that day, I realized this world was not soft for women like us. My mother worked in the fields during the day and stitched clothes at night. Her hands were always rough, her back bent with hard work, but her eyes always told me, Sophia, one day, your life will be better than mine. I believed her. I always believed her. The man from the city. When I turned 18, a man named Victor came into our lives. He was from the city, tall, confident, with clothes that smelled of perfume, not sweat and dust like the men in our village. He spoke to my mother first. He told her, I can give Sophia a better life. She will see the world beyond these fields. She will have everything she deserves. My mother looked at me with hope. I looked at Victor's smiling face and thought, maybe this is the chance life is giving me. He spoke kindly. He told me about the city, the lights, the shops, the big houses. He said, Sophia, you won't have to work like your mother. You will be respected, loved. And I believed him. The wedding. The whole village came to see the wedding. Girls whispered to each other, Sophia is so lucky. She is going to the city. I smiled shyly. My heart was full of hope. Victor held my hand and said, from today your life will change. I will keep you happy, Sophia. Always. I wanted to believe him so much. First days in the city. The city was nothing like my village. Tall buildings touched the sky. The roads were wide and cars moved like waves of metal and light. For the first time in my life, I saw shops filled with clothes, jewelry, food I had never tasted before. Victor took me to a small but clean apartment. It wasn't big, but to me it felt like a palace. For the first few weeks, Victor was kind. He bought me a red dress, my first pair of high-heeled shoes, and even a small silver chain for my neck. At night, we would sit on the balcony. I would tell him about my childhood, about my mother, about the nights under the stars. He would listen quietly and say, forget the past, Sophia. Now you are here with me. Life will only get better. And I believed him. The first crack, but slowly, things began to change. It started small. One evening, I asked Victor if we could send some money to my mother. He frowned and said, "We'll see." Another day, I told him I wanted to join an English class nearby. He looked at me sharply and said, "Why? You stay home. You don't need that." I laughed softly, trying to hide the uneasiness in my heart. Then one night, Victor came home late. His voice was louder. His words harsher. "Why is the food cold? What do you do all day, Sophia?" "Nothing." It was the first time his words felt like a slap. I stood there, frozen. I wanted to say, "Victor, you promised me a better life." But my lips wouldn't open. Maybe it was just one bad day, I told myself. Maybe tomorrow will be better. When promises fade. But the bad days started coming more often. Sometimes he wouldn't talk to me for hours. Sometimes he would criticize everything I did. The food, the house, even the way I dressed. I tried to stay calm. I tried to remember the man who had promised me love and happiness. But slowly, I felt like a bird in a cage. I wasn't allowed to go out alone. I wasn't allowed to call my mother without asking him first. I wasn't allowed to make any decision for myself. The city that once looked so bright now felt like a prison. The night I cried alone. One night after Victor had shouted at me for forgetting to add salt to the food, I locked myself in the bathroom. I sat on the cold floor, hugging my knees, and for the first time since coming to the city, I cried. I missed my mother. I missed my village. I missed the girl I used to be before all this. But when I wiped my tears and looked in the mirror, I told myself, "Sophia, you have to be strong. Maybe this is just a phase. Maybe he will change." But deep down, I knew things were only getting worse. The days after that night changed something inside me. I tried to smile, tried to cook his favorite dishes, tried to be the perfect wife. But no matter what I did, Victor was never happy. At first, it was just anger in his words. Then it became silence. A cold, heavy silence that filled every corner of the house. Control. One morning, I asked softly, "Victor, can I visit my mother? It's been 3 months." He looked at me with eyes that were colder than winter. "You don't need to go there," he said. "They will only fill your head with nonsense. This is your home now." I nodded. I told myself maybe he was right. Maybe he just wanted me to focus on our life together. But when I tried to call my mother secretly, he found out. That night, he shouted so loudly the neighbors could hear. "Do you think you can hide things from me, Sophia? I told you. This is my house. My rules." His words cut deeper than any knife. The first slap, it happened on a Sunday. I had made tea for him. Maybe the sugar was too much, or maybe he was just looking for a reason. He threw the cup on the floor, tea splashing everywhere. And then it happened. His hand on my face. For a second, the world stopped. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, feeling the heat on my cheek, my ears ringing with silence. He looked at me and said, "Don't make me angry again." And he walked out. I sat on the floor for hours, staring at the broken pieces of the cup, thinking about all the promises he once made. Loneliness. After that day, something inside me began to die slowly. The house felt bigger, emptier. The walls seemed to watch me, silently judging my every move. Victor would leave in the morning, come home late at night. Sometimes drunk, sometimes angry, sometimes both. I had no friends in the city, no one to talk to. My mother's voice on the phone was the only warmth I had left. But even those calls became less frequent because I didn't want her to worry. I started talking to myself in the mirror, whispering, "Sophia, you're strong. You can survive this." But deep inside, I felt like I was disappearing. The lost dreams. I had dreams once. I wanted to study, learn English, maybe work one day, stand on my own feet. But every time I mentioned it, Victor laughed. "Study, work. Don't be stupid, Sophia. A wife's place is at home. That's all." His words felt like chains around my heart. I began to wonder, was this the life my mother wanted for me? Was this the better future she dreamed of? The neighbors, one afternoon, an old lady from the next building knocked on my door. "You look pale, child," she said softly. "Is everything okay?" I smiled weakly and lied. "Yes, Auntie, I'm fine." But she looked at the faint bruise on my arm and sighed. She didn't ask any more questions. As she left, she whispered, "God give you strength." And that night, I cried again. Victor's words. Victor had a way of breaking me without touching me. "You're useless, Sophia. You can't do anything right. No wonder nobody wanted you before." Each word was like a stone thrown at my heart. I started believing him. Maybe I was useless. Maybe this was all I deserved. The diary. One day, while cleaning the old cupboard, I found an empty notebook. I started writing in it secretly at night. "Dear diary," I wrote, "today he didn't talk to me. Today he broke another plate. Today I cried again." Page after page, I poured my heart out. That diary became my only friend, my only witness. A letter to my mother. After 6 months, I finally wrote a letter to my mother. "Ma, I'm fine," I lied. "The city is beautiful. Victor takes care of me, don't worry." But as I wrote those words, my tears fell on the paper, smudging the ink. I couldn't tell her the truth. I didn't want her heart to break the way mine was breaking every day. The darkness inside. By the end of the year, I hardly recognized myself. The girl who once dreamed under the stars was gone. Now there was only a shadow of Sophia, silent, scared, waiting for the next storm. Sometimes I wonder, how much pain can a heart hold before it finally breaks? I used to think I was strong. I used to believe love could fix anything. But as the months passed, Victor's love felt like a lie, and his anger became my only reality. The night of the storm. It was raining heavily that night. Thunder rolled across the sky as if heaven itself was angry. Victor came home late, drunk, his footsteps uneven. I could smell the alcohol before he even entered the room. "Where's my dinner?" he shouted. I ran to the kitchen, my hands trembling. The food was warm, but not warm enough for him. He threw the plate on the floor. "You can't do anything right, Sophia." His voice was louder than the storm outside. I stood there, silent, because silence was safer. But that night, silence was not enough. The beating, it happened so fast. His hand hit me, then again and again. The sound of the rain outside mixed with the sound of my own heartbeat, fast and terrified. I tried to protect my face, but he pushed me to the ground. I remember the taste of blood in my mouth, the cold floor under my cheek, the smell of alcohol in the air. When he finally stopped, I wasn't even crying. My tears had run out long ago. The neighbors heard the next morning as I walked slowly to throw the trash. I saw two women whispering near the gate. One of them looked at me with pity. The other shook her head as if saying, "Why doesn't she leave him?" They didn't know. I had nowhere to go, no money, no family nearby. And my mother, she still thought I was happy. The lock on the door. One day, when I said I wanted to visit the market alone, Victor laughed cruelly. "You? Alone? Do you think I'll let you run away?" The next day, he put a lock on the outside of the door whenever he left for work, like I was a prisoner in my own home. I remember sitting by the window for hours, watching people outside walking freely, laughing, living. While I sat there like a bird in a cage, waiting for evening, waiting for his anger, waiting for my own courage that never came. The letter I never sent, one night after he fell asleep, I wrote a letter. "Ma, I want to come home. I can't live like this anymore. I'm scared." But I never posted it. I tore it into pieces because I knew my mother was old, her health weak. If she knew the truth, it would break her heart. So I stayed silent. The day I fell. It was a small thing. I was carrying water from the kitchen when Victor shouted my name. I hurried. My foot slipped on the wet floor, the metal jug fell. Water spilled everywhere. And then his anger exploded. He pushed me so hard I fell against the table. Pain shot through my back. For days I couldn't walk properly. But I told the neighbors I had fallen by mistake. Because that's what women like me do. We hide the truth behind weak smiles. Losing myself, months passed. I stopped looking in the mirror. I didn't want to see the bruises. I didn't want to see the girl who once dreamed of love and family, now reduced to fear and silence. Victor had taken everything. My smile, my freedom, My voice, I was alive, but it didn't feel like living. The baby. And then, one day, I found out I was pregnant. For a moment, I thought this child might change things. Maybe Victor would soften, maybe he would love me again. But when I told him, he just stared at me coldly and said, "You can't even take care of yourself. How will you raise a child?" There was no joy in his eyes, no hope, nothing. I realized then this baby would be born into the same darkness I was living in. Sometimes life pushes you so far into the darkness that you either break completely or you find a tiny light inside you that refuses to die. That night, I didn't know which one would happen to me. The night of no return. It was winter. The cold winds entered through the cracks in the windows, but the real coldness was inside this house, inside Victor's heart. He came home angry again. I could tell by the way the door slammed. He didn't speak at first. He just stared at me like I was some stranger who had ruined his life. Then he threw the grocery bag on the table. "You didn't clean the house properly," he said. His voice was quiet, too quiet. And that was always worse than the shouting. Because when Victor was quiet, it meant the storm was about to explode. The worst beating. It happened so fast I didn't even have time to cry. His fists, his kicks, the sound of breaking glass. I remember falling against the wall, my body curling up to protect my stomach, to protect the baby inside me. But he didn't stop. At one point, I heard a sound escape my throat. Not a scream, not even words, just pain. When it was over, I lay there on the floor, unable to move. The baby. I could only pray my baby was still alive. Victor left the house. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was drunk, I don't know. All I knew was this was the lowest point of my life. The mirror scene. Hours later, I crawled to the small mirror on the wall. I wanted to see myself. But when I looked, I didn't recognize the face staring back. Swollen eyes, cut lip, a bruise spreading across my cheek like a dark flower. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. I whispered to myself, "This is not living. This is not love. This is not what I was born for." The neighbor's help. The next day, the same neighbor woman, Mrs. Khan, knocked on my door. She had seen the bruises. "Sophia," she said softly, "you can't stay like this. He will kill you one day." Her words stayed with me long after she left. Kill me? Yes, I realized she was right. If I didn't leave, one day, this house would become my grave. The baby's heartbeat. A week later, I went for a checkup alone. The doctor placed a small machine on my stomach, and then I heard it. The tiny heartbeat of my baby. Fast, strong, alive. I cried silently because in that heartbeat, I heard hope. I wanted this baby to live in a world where there was love, not fear. But for that, I had to be brave. The plan. That night when Victor slept, I sat in the kitchen with a small bag. I put in only what I could carry: a few clothes, my documents, and the little money I had secretly saved over months. My hands were shaking, because leaving wasn't just about walking out the door. It was about stepping into a world I didn't know, with no idea if I would survive. The final straw. Before dawn, Victor woke up angry again. He accused me of hiding money from him. He shouted, cursed, threw a chair across the room. And then he raised his hand again. But this time, I grabbed his wrist. For the first time in years, I looked straight into his eyes and said, "Enough, Victor." My voice didn't even sound like mine. It was calm, steady. That moment was the breaking point. I knew if I stayed one more day, I would lose not just my baby, but myself. The escape. That night when he went out drinking, I left. The rain was falling again, just like the night of the first beating. But this time, I wasn't afraid of the storm. I walked to the bus station with my small bag, one hand on my stomach, whispering to my baby, "We're leaving this behind. We're going to find the light." When you leave behind years of pain, you don't just walk into happiness overnight. You carry the scars, you carry the memories, but somewhere inside, you also carry a tiny seed of hope. And hope can grow in the most broken soil. The shelter. The first night after leaving Victor, I stayed at a women's shelter. It wasn't easy to knock on that door. My hands shook as I explained everything to the kind lady there. She gave me a bed. She gave me warm food. She gave me something I hadn't felt in years: safety. That night, for the first time in so long, I slept without fear. Finding work. Life outside was not easy. I had no job, no real money, and a baby on the way. But I had two things Victor could never break. 1, my will to survive. 2, my dream for my baby. I started working at a small bakery near the shelter. The smell of fresh bread every morning. The sound of people laughing. It was like slowly learning to breathe again. Letters from Victor weeks later. Letters started arriving. Victor wrote things like, "I'm sorry. I'll change. Come back home." But I knew better now. His words were like empty shells. No life inside. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I just kept walking forward. The baby is born. 9 months later, in a small hospital room, I heard that same heartbeat again. Only this time, it was followed by a cry. A tiny, beautiful cry that filled the whole room with life. My baby girl. I named her Lily. Because even in the darkest places, lilies find a way to bloom. When I held her for the first time, I promised, "You will never know the fear I knew. You will never cry the tears I cried." A new beginning. Life slowly became a series of small victories. I saved money. I moved into a tiny apartment with Lily. I worked extra hours, learned new skills, even took evening classes. Every day was hard, but every day was ours. The speech. A year later, the shelter invited me to speak to other women. Standing in front of them, my voice shook at first. But then I looked at Lily in the front row, her big curious eyes watching me. And I spoke. I told them about the bruises, the nights of fear, the escape, the bakery job, the birth of my daughter. And I told them this: we are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become after it. The final scene, one evening, years later, I took Lily to the park. The sun was setting. The sky was painted with colors I hadn't noticed in years: orange, pink, gold. She ran ahead of me, laughing, her tiny feet kicking up dust. I sat on a bench, closed my eyes, and felt the wind on my face. No fear, no shouting, no victor, just peace. And in that moment, I realized something. I hadn't just left a man. I had left behind an entire life of pain and stepped into a life where I was free. Sophia's last words. If someone ever asks me how I survived, I will tell them this: sometimes you have to break to start again. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. And sometimes the storm you thought would destroy you is the one that clears your path.